Good morning, all of you. How are you all? So, I welcome you to this session, right? And today we are going to discuss the various passages and the VA questions that came in slot 1 of CAT 2021. So, this will help you to know what kind of passages came. If you have any queries regarding the questions, their answers, we are going to discuss those. Okay, and for those of you who are targeting CAT 2022, we'll give you an idea of what kind of VA questions come, what kind of passages come, what kind of questions come, all of those things, right? So let's begin. Now, uh, before I begin, just give me a second. Yes. So here we have an RC passage. So let me just walk you through the paper first, right? We have RC passages, right? 4 RC passages with 4 questions each. So 5 to 8, 9 to 12, 13 to 16. These were the RC questions. Post that we have our para summary, para jumbles questions. Okay, so 8 verbal logic questions as I call them. Some of you call them verbal ability. Right. So let's start with a passage that students found relatively difficult. Okay, so let's start with that passage first. Okay, so here's a passage on utopia and dystopia. First of all, to attempt this passage, all of us need to be aware what utopia is, what dystopia is, right? So yes, utopia, U means good. So an imaginary society where people are happy, where everything is good, right? Where the policies are, let's say, not discriminatory. So basically, an imaginary society, the ideal society where everybody is happy. Dystopia is just the opposite of utopia, an imaginary society where everyone is unhappy. Okay, so now that you have an idea of what utopia is, what dystopia is, let's attempt this passage. Okay, I'm giving you 2 minutes, not more than that, to read this, and then let's attempt the questions. Basically, my idea is to take up your queries. So, if there must be some questions in which you might have queries in this RC passage, we'll take up those. Right? Start. Read the RC passage and my just a second. Just- I hope the passage is clearly visible to all of you now. All right, so I'm looking at my stopwatch and it's been 2 minutes. Yes. Everybody has read the passage. I need some response from your end, a yes or a no. Come on. Come on, quick. Some of you have already read the passage. You have an idea about it. Yes? Those of you who took CAT 2021 slot 1. Come on, give me a yes or a no. A response I need. Okay. All right, and I'm assuming that is a yes. And I'm coming to the first question here. This is question 9. I want you to read the question and tell me what the answer is. In case you have any query, any option is not clear to you, you can ask me that as well. Yes. What has happened? Come on, come on. Give me a response. So tell me if you're able to hear me and tell me that. I need some response from your end. Otherwise, this is like speaking into a void. Come on. Hi, Kushag. Can you hear me? All right, then I'll just discuss the answers then. So, following from the passage, which one of the following may be seen as a characteristic of a utopian society? So, from the passage, whatever you've read, which one may be seen as a characteristic of a utopian society? Right. So, if I look at the options, then right away, see, there has been no discussion of merit and privilege. So this is right away alien. I could eliminate this. Then 3 says a society without any laws to restrain one's individuality. If you've read the passage carefully, you realize that we are talking about the presence of laws restraining the individual's individuality in a utopian society, right? In fact, the passage begins from some such rules, right? The second paragraph continues this discussion that how there were a number of laws, how there were a number of rules through which the individuality of a person was restrained. So this is outrightly false as per the passage. Yes, remember, so we discussed these things that you eliminate alien options, you eliminate false options. So these two are right away eliminated. Now, between these two, the regulation of homogeneity through promoting competitive heterogeneity. Okay. Regulation means again putting a restriction on something of homogeneity. Whereas My second paragraph says that in a utopian society there has been a lot of homogeneity. That's what my second paragraph tells me. So there is no promotion of comparative heterogeneity. Okay, this is again going against the passage. So this one, out of the four questions in this passage that was relatively difficult, this one was a relatively easy question. Okay, provided you eliminate it. So institutional surveillance of every individual to ensure his or her security and welfare. Yes, this is something that we see right from the first paragraph. There is this institutional surveillance. We cannot travel outside our neighborhood without passports. We must wear the same plain clothes. We must exchange our houses every 10 years. We cannot avoid labor. We all go to bed at the same time. Okay, so there is this institutional surveillance which is providing you security, which is ensuring your welfare. Okay, see, even things like the desire for public power is curbed, marriage and sexual intercourse are often controlled. All of these are examples of institutional surveillance on your lives, isn't it? So, this is our answer, option 2. Okay, let's see this question then. I hope the previous one was clear to you. That was a relatively easy question in this difficult passage. Question 10, again, let's see what you mark. Type in your choices and then let's discuss. Tell me. Okay. So, this question was a relatively tricky one. Okay, why was it tricky? Because it required an in-depth understanding of the passage. How? Let's see. So, while when you looked at two, you realize that okay, I have just read something like this in the last paragraph. So look at this RC passage, the last paragraph. We say that they appear to be, indeed, they might be twins. They might be twins. Utopia and dystopia might be twins, the progeny of the same parents. So students are usually able to recall this from the last paragraph, and they do realize this also that yes, my last paragraph says might be, whereas this says are. There is a difference there. However, sometimes, so what again I heard from students was that they got confused between option 1 and 2. Okay, so let's see whether one can be inferred or not. Utopian societies exist in a long tradition of literature. Okay, have I talked about any literature here? Let's see. Dealing with imaginary people, practicing imaginary customs in imaginary worlds. Of course, if we are talking about literature, if we are talking about fiction, it would have imaginary people practicing imaginary customs in imaginary worlds. Yes, and that too we are talking about a utopian society in fiction, so all of this is bound to happen. So let's see if that is the case. See, such a conclusion, so whatever conclusion was made here, that okay, so such a conclusion might be fortified by examining selectively the tradition which follows more on these points. So More was a person that was mentioned in the first paragraph as well, in More's time. Okay, so probably he wrote something about Utopia, probably he was an important figure in the utopian thinking, we don't know, right? But we do talk about a tradition which follows more on those points. Then, later on, we also mentioned this. In Tommaso Campanella's The City of the Sun, so this is definitely a written work, The first great literary utopia after Morse. This tells me that More wrote perhaps a novel on utopia. Then Tommaso Campanella followed it with The City of the Sun, and we are calling it the first great literary utopia after Morse. Okay, and we are saying that we are calling this a tradition, the tradition which follows more on those points. So that means there was this tradition of writing about utopia. Okay, and how do we know that it's a long tradition? From the last sentence. Utopian homogeneity remains a familiar theme well into the 20th century. So, theme, a familiar theme on which people wrote well into the 20th century. So, that's why this eliminating option 1 required an in depth understanding of the second paragraph. That is what made this question relatively tricky. Okay? So, 1 is eliminated because it can be inferred. Second is our answer. Let's have a look at 3 and 4. It is possible to see utopias as dystopias with a change in perspective because one person's utopia could be seen as another's dystopia. Absolutely. This is something that the author says right in the beginning that uh, the conception of the utopian society as seen from these rules, right, as seen from these rules, this can actually seem perilously dystopian. So today, it can seem very dystopian to us, all of these ideas. Because what are they doing? They are repressing variety. They are curtailing privacy. है ना? So, we can say this. And in fact, the last paragraph is devoted to this only. That utopia and dystopia evidently share more in common than is often supposed. So, one person's utopia can be the other's dystopia. So, can be inferred and eliminated. Then, fourth says many conceptions of utopian societies emphasize the importance of social unity and cultural homogeneity. From our second paragraph, this can very well be inferred that yes, they focused on uniformity, on homogeneity. This is something, in fact, the first paragraph, these rules also help us to gauge that. So, fourth could again be eliminated because it can be inferred, right? 2 is our answer here, because of the fact that my passage says might be while the option says are. That is extreme, cannot be inferred. Okay, so the next question says, what is the sequence of words that best captures the narrative of the passage, right? So if I look at this, the sequence of words, definitely utopia has been talked about. So that has to form a part of the answer. The examiner is also clever. See, utopia is there in every option. Then if you see, we have just discussed that the second paragraph focuses on uniformity, on homogeneity, isn't it? So because of that, even homogeneity forms a very important part of this RC passage, right? So any option that does not have it can be eliminated here. Moreover, coercion is not something that has been discussed. Okay. Then relentless transparency is not one of the major themes in the passage. Just one sentence about it has been mentioned. Yes. So once I eliminate all of these, I am left with just option 2. Utopia. We talk about how utopia provides security, how utopia wants homogeneity, but how there are certain intentional communities also. There are certain intentional communities, right? We talk about thousands of intentional communities, successful intentional communities in which a cooperative ethos predominates and where harmony without coercion is the rule to set aside such an assertion, right? So 2 is our answer here. I hope so far it's so good. Let's go to the 12th question. All of the following arguments are made in the passage except that. So, which of the following arguments has not been made? That is what we have to figure out. Yes. What do you say? We have actually, in the process of discussing the previous questions, we have discussed some of these options. For instance, we have already discussed this. So, this is an argument that has been made in the third paragraph, isn't it? So, this is eliminated. Then, fourth is a specific option that relies on one specific sentence. Let me show you that sentence. it would be almost impossible for man to be depraved or wicked. Okay, this often portrays societies, these utopian societies that follow more, it often portrays societies where it would be almost impossible for man to be depraved or wicked. This is achieved both through institutions and modes. Modes means our customs, right? So, yes, the tradition of utopian literature has often shown societies in which it would be nearly impossible for anyone to be sinful or criminal, wicked or depraved. So, can be inferred from the second paragraph. Between 1 and 2, 2 says in early modern utopianism, the stability of utopian societies was seen to be achieved only with the individuals surrendering their sense of self. The entire para 2 talks about homogeneity, uniformity, about the state institutions controlling something as personal as, let's say, marriage or sexual intercourse, isn't it? So, what are we doing? We are controlling people, we are ensuring uniformity. Yes? See, relations are forbidden to men before the age of 21 and women before 19. Communal child rearing is normal. So we are ensuring a sort of collectivism, a sort of curtailment of privacy, of ensuring homogeneity. All of that is happening. So people became more alike in appearance, opinion, and outlook than they often have been. Unity, order, and homogeneity thus prevail at the cost of individuality and diversity. So people are surrendering their sense of self, isn't it? At the cost of individuality and diversity. This is what happened. So, and we say that this is something, this model that demonstrates, this guy demonstrates dominated early modern utopianism. So, early modern utopianism में यही था that people became alike in every respect and homogeneity prevailed at the cost of individuality. So, yes, people are surrendering their sense of self, isn't it? So, even this argument has been made, this can be eliminated. We found it in the second paragraph. Our answer is 1. 1 is actually a distorted, twisted option. It is distorted, it is twisted. How? How is it distorted and twisted? Let's see. This says in most time there was plenty and security. This part is correct. So this part is correct. So people did not need restraints that could appear reasonable. People did not need restraints that could appear unreasonable. Whereas my passage says that in most time, for much of the population, given the plenty and security on offer, such restraints would not have seemed overly unreasonable. So it's not like people did not need those restraints that would be unreasonable. It's just that even such kinds of restraints that we must wear the same plain clothes, we must exchange our houses every 10 years, even these did not seem unreasonable to them. ठीक है तो ऐसा नहीं था उन्हें जरूरत नहीं थी ऐसे ऐसे रिस्ट्रेंट्स की जो अनरीजनेबल लगे इट्स जस्ट दैट उन्हें वो रिस्ट्रेंट्स अनरीजनेबल लगते ही नहीं थे दैट्स द डिफरेंस इफ आई एक्सप्लेन दिस टू यू इन हिंदी राइट सो this part here is erroneous, it's distorted, it's twisted, and that's why 1 is the answer here. This argument has not been made in the passage. So all in all, a relatively tricky passage. I think 2 questions here were doable, right? The first that I just showed you. Then I think even this was doable in case you understood the broad arguments that were made in the passage, right? This one and the last one, they did require some investment of time on your part. Okay, so in case, some of you didn't attempt it, it's absolutely fine, right? Now, let's look at the second passage. So this was the first passage. Let's look at the second passage that students found to be tricky. And this was this passage about the Mayans. Okay, the Mayan civilization, of what they treated as a person and what they basically their conceptions of what all a person could be. Right. So let's see this passage. I am hoping some of you have already read it, some of you have actually attempted it in your exam. Right, still giving you a bit of time. Look at this, and then let's attempt the questions. I think you must have seen this passage so as to get a broad idea of it. You're able to recall what you saw in the exam. Okay then. Let's come to this question here. Okay, so additional complexity. So again, this was a relatively trickier passage. That's why I'm discussing it. Okay, and this question, again, it did require your understanding of the example of one particular example that was given in the passage. So which one of the following best explains the additional complexity that the example of the incense burner illustrates regarding personhood for the classic Maya? Okay, so example of incense burner is talking about personhood, and we know where it is, yes, after the reading of the passage. So let's see what additional complexity has been talked about there. Let's go to the example. See this, the last paragraph, begin reading from the very beginning. Personhood was a non-binary proposition for the Mayan. Binary, bi means two. So binary is something that has just two facets to it, two aspects to it, like 0 and 1, binary, we say this now. So personhood was a non-binary proposition for the Mayan. They didn't look at it as someone is a person, someone is not a person. It wasn't a binary. या तो आप person हो या आप person नहीं हो. अगर आप person हो तो आप कुछ और नहीं हो सकते हो. ऐसा नहीं सोचते थे. Entities were able to be persons while also being something else. Entities were able to be persons while also being something else. So what else can they be? The faced objects I looked at indicate that they continue to be functional, doing what objects do. So while, let's say, they made faces on their objects, called them persons, however, these tools, whom they called persons, they were able to remain objects also. They did their job, they performed their function. So they were able to remain objects also. So for instance, a stone implement continues to job, an incense burner continues to do its smoky work. So they were able to remain objects. Furthermore, the Maya visually depicted many objects in ways that indicated the material category to which they belonged. Drawings of the stone implement show that a person tool is still made of stone. So not only did they recognize their whatever objects they designated as persons, they were able to remain objects. They were able to remain of the material of which they were made. So a stone tool remained of stone, right? In their depictions also, it was depicted that it was made of stone. One additional complexity. Now, what is the additional complexity? The incense burner, which we talked about earlier, which would have been made of clay and decorated with spiky appliques representing the sacred ceiba tree found in this region, categorized as a person. It is categorized as a person, this incense burner, right? But also as a tree. But it is also categorized as a tree. So look at what all we have done to the incense burner, what all the Mayans have done to the incense burner. They have categorized it as a person, but at the same time, they have categorized it as an object. They have also shown what material it is made of. That material has been retained, and they have also categorized it as a tree. So there are three other categories also in which they have put it: an object, a material, and a tree. With these Maya examples, we are challenged to discard the person or non-person binary that constitutes our basic ontological output. Okay, so we have talked about three things here. The incense burner, which is categorized as a person, is able to be all these three things as well, right? The additional complexity was that of this. It's being categorized as a tree. So now, after all this information, when I look at the question, I realize that my answer should be 4. The example adds a new layer to the non-binary understanding. जो third category है, additional complexity क्या है? Tree की तरह categorize करना, right? So this is the additional complexity. So it adds a new layer. पहले object बोला, फिर material भी बोला, now tree भी बोल दिया. Adds a new layer to the non-binary understanding of personhood by bringing in a third category that shares a similar relation with the previous two. That shares a similar relation with the previous two. How does it share a similar relationship? Students have this question. Similar कैसे है relationship? Similar ऐसे है that all of these, first, second and third, they are adding to the non-binary understanding. If something, apart from being a person, is at the same time an object, is at the same time a material, and at the same time a tree, that adds to the non-binary understanding of personhood. No? That something that is a person can be all these three things. That is how they are related. This third also represents what else can something categorized as a person be. Okay, and that's why this answer and not 1, because 1 was very similar, so students had this one. Okay, so eliminated 1, 4 is our answer. These two could be easily eliminated. It's not an exception to the non-binary understanding. It is in fact furthering the concept of non-binary understanding. It does not complicate the non-binary understanding. Okay, and divine and the profane, these are just alien. Establishing the porosity. Porous is something that has holes in it, of the divine and the profane. No, alien idea. Eliminated. Right? So this question here was slightly tricky. I would call it tricky, right? And 1 and 4 were pretty similar. You had to just focus on these two words, similar, dissimilar, to find out the answer. Okay. Question 6. Which one of the following, if true about the classic Maya, would invalidate the purpose? Invalidate. Basically destroy or weaken the purpose of the iPhone example. So what was the purpose of the iPhone example? Through that, we were trying to establish whether our iPhone would be a human or not. That's what the author was trying to find out. Okay, and the author said the answer was no. The iPhone was not a person. Why? Because the Mayan logic was that non-human persons were not tethered or tied up to specific humans, and they did not derive their personhood from a connection with a human. No. Okay. So this was the whole point of explaining that iPhone example, to tell you that no, that iPhone would not be a person just because it was tied up to a human, depended on a human being for its resource. So this is the point that the author was trying to establish through that example. You have to weaken this point. Okay, that non-human persons were not tied up to specific humans. So if I'm somehow able to say that no, they were tied up to specific humans and they did derive their personhood from a connection with a human, I would have done my job. So this, and what should our answer be? Tell me, tell me, tell me. Invalidate the purpose of the iPhone example. If I say 2, although you might be thinking incense burner kahan se aa gaya iPhone se. So this is sort of a further application question also. If through this example I show that the personhood of the incense burner and the stone chopper was a function of their usefulness to humans, that means I am saying that their personhood depends on how useful they are to human beings. So I am invalidating what I said through the iPhone, that they were not tethered to specific humans. They are tethered to humans here if I say that. And if I say that, this would invalidate the purpose of the iPhone example. ठीक है? So this was a pretty straightforward question in my opinion. Moving on to the seventh question. Yes, anybody who wishes to answer this? Which one of the following worldviews can be inferred to be closest to that of the classic Maya? Again, I would call this a relatively easy question. Okay, so a tribe that perceives its hunting weapons as sacred person artifacts because of their significance to its survival. No, this would not fit because this again calls them persons because of their usefulness to humans. The Mayans did say that. The Mayans were not of this view. A tribe that perceives its utensils as person utensils in light of their functionality and bodily needs. Okay, so um, could be the answer. Let's keep it in full. A futuristic society that perceives robots to be persons as well as robots because of similarity to humans. Again, connection with humans, Mayans नहीं बोलते थे. उस basis पे personhood नहीं defined है. So between 2 and 4, one has to be the answer. Let's see 4. A tribe that perceives plants as person plants because they form an ecosystem and are marked by needs of nutrition. So they form an ecosystem and are marked by needs of nutrition. Let's go to the passage to find out that which was best. See, the Maya saw personhood as activated by experiencing certain bodily needs and through participation in certain social activities. So both of these, bodily needs and participation in social activities. So this just talks about, just a second. This just talks about bodily needs. Here, it talks about bodily needs, needs of nutrition, and forming an ecosystem is participation in social activities. That is why this is a better answer choice as compared to this. This is incomplete. Fourth is our answer. Hope this is clear to all of you. Okay then. The last question of this passage. Let's have a look. Which one of the following, if true, would not undermine the democratizing potential of the classic Maya worldview? So that means 3 of these would undermine the fact that they were very democratic in their thinking of what they called a person. They didn't just confine the term person to humans. Okay, so that way they were democratic, right? You have to mark that answer which does not undermine this. That means 3 of the options are going to undermine the democratic potential, right? So if I say they understood the stone implement and the incense burner in a purely human form, that means they're not democratic. वो person को human ही समझ रहे हैं, उससे beyond कुछ समझ ही नहीं रहे. They believe that animals like cats and dogs that live in proximity to humans have a more clearly articulated personhood. Again, this will not be a democratic way of thinking because you are saying human से connection है इसलिए person है, otherwise नहीं होता. Eliminated. So between 1 and 4, very easy because here they are assigning personhood to some things and not assigning it to others. So this is not a democratic thinking, not democratic. Again, it is undermining. So A, first is our answer. They depicted their human healers with physical attributes of local medicinal plant. तो अब वो human healers को अपने local medicinal plants के attributes दे रहे हैं and not vice versa. अगर vice versa होता तो ये भी आंसर नहीं होता. ह्यूमन हीलर्स को अपने मेडिसिनल प्लांट्स के एट्रीब्यूट्स दे रहे हैं तो ये अंडरमाइन नहीं करेगा. ओके, दैट्स व्हाई फर्स्ट इज आवर आंसर. Anything that shows that persons are humans only, persons are related to humans only, would undermine the democratizing potential. Anything that gives personhood to one thing and not to the other would undermine the democratizing potential. One is doing neither of these, and that is why it is our answer. So these were the 2 RC passages that students found to be tricky in the exam. I have discussed both of these with you along with the solutions. I hope these are clear to you. Now I can be a little selective, I believe. So the tea trade passage. So I didn't find anything that was just a second. The stream is okay. Give me a second. I hope I am audible and visible to all of you. Right. Hoping that I'm audible and visible. The passage on tea trade was the easiest passage out there in your exam. Okay, this was the scoring passage. This is where you should have got all four correct. Okay, so here I don't think there is much to discuss. All the four questions were pretty straightforward, could be attempted very easily. In case you have some query, you can ask me. Otherwise, we are going to skip this passage. Okay, all right. Coming to the cuttlefish passage, the passage on cuttlefish. So again, students have been asking me this query, particularly regarding one question. Okay, एक क्वेश्चन में स्टूडेंट्स को क्वेरी है cuttlefish वाले क्वेश्चन में. I'll discuss that. Just giving you a bit of time to read this. Right, giving you a bit of time to read this. A very simple experiment has been explained in this passage. Okay, this experiment, what did it do? Basically, it found out something. It found out that cuttlefish have the potential to display self-control. Okay, so they have the potential to display self-control. And why is that important? If they can display self-control, it's important because self-control is thought to be the cornerstone of intelligence, as it is an important prerequisite for complex decision making and planning for the future. So it's thought to be an important, basically a very important part, that is an important factor in intelligence. So something that is required for complex decision making and planning for the future. That's why this experiment becomes important. So then we gave the details of this experiment, and we said towards the end that cuttlefish were able to display self-control. The longest that a cuttlefish waited for its reward. What was its reward? The shrimp. Cuttlefish like shrimp, right? So their favorite food is live grass shrimp. The longest that a cuttlefish waited was 130 seconds. That's what they saw in the experiment, right? So we talked about how they distracted themselves also when they were waiting. And towards the end, this paragraph is important. Not every species can use self-control. Not every species can use self-control, but most of the animals that can share another trait in common, long social lives. Cuttlefish, on the other hand, are solitary creatures. They live alone, that don't form relationships even with mates or young. Okay. We don't know if living in a social group is important for complex cognition unless we show that those abilities are lacking in social species, in less social species. So, towards the end, we are trying to draw a connection between living in a social group and complex cognition, with no conclusive results on them having appeared so far. Right? However, we are studying the relationship, as can be seen from the last paragraph. So with this understanding, I've given you a broad understanding of this passage. Let's look at the questions. Now, the one question that students found challenging was, just a second, this one, question 16. Which one of the following, if true, would best complement the passage's findings? Would best complement. Complement is something that adds to and is consistent with. That is what complement means. The passage's findings. This question primarily had to do through elimination. So two options were very easy here. They could be eliminated very easily. Cuttlefish cannot distinguish between geometrical shapes. This goes against the experiment because in the experiment relies on their being able to distinguish between various geometrical shapes. तो अगर ये हो गया तो फिर तो experiment ही wobbly हो गया, shaky हो गया. So this can't be the answer. Also, the experiment relies on their being most fond of grass shrimp. Okay, so if you see here, their favorite food is live grass shrimp, while raw prawns are so-so, and Asian shore crab is nearly unacceptable. So 1, 2, 3. There's a ranking here. If you say that they're equally fond of live grass shrimp and raw prawn, again the experiment is useless in a way, isn't it? Because then, what's the point of waiting then if they're equally fond of both? Goes against the experiment. So either 3 or 1. One says cuttlefish wait longer than 100 seconds. But वो तो हमने already दिखा दिया experiment में, isn't it? That the longest that a cuttlefish waited was 130 seconds. So this does not add anything. This does not add to the passage's findings. We are left with 3. Cuttlefish live in big groups that exhibit sociability. Towards the end, we are trying to establish a relationship between living in a big social group and complex decision making. Although the results have not been very conclusive here, yet the fact that such a relationship is being studied, okay, and it is being mulled on that whether, those that live in big social groups, do they have complex cognition? If I somehow show this, okay, and I've already shown that they have self-control, these factors could help me as a researcher in establishing that, okay, this is why they are able of complex cognition, or probably yes, they are capable of complex cognition, right? So 3 is the one that's going to help, and that's why 3 is the answer. Primarily, you have to do this through elimination. So I think this is it. This passage otherwise was an easy passage, right? And this is the one question that students have been asking me over WhatsApp and other platforms. I thought to discuss this, right? So yeah, this is about your RC passages. I hope now any queries that you had, particularly in your difficult passages, now those have been sorted. Para summary. 3 questions from para summary were there. I think 2 of them were pretty easy as far as slot 1 is concerned, right? So some students, they found this one to be a little iffy. They were confused between 2 and 3. 2 and 3. So what you had to realize here was focus क्या है? Focus क्या है paragraph का? Has it been on the fact that it has been replicated many times? Okay, it has been demonstrated many times, or has it been on what it is? The illusion. If you see these, most of the sentences, they are devoted towards explaining what it is. Okay, so that's why what it is going to be the part of the summary. So again, was doable in case you saw the fact that majority of the paragraph was devoted to explaining what neck-curving neck is. ठीक है? The other 2 para summary questions, I didn't think they were very challenging, right? You could eliminate easily using the options, right? Any query in para jumbles and basically the sequence para jumbles and odd sentence ones, you can ask me. A very easy para jumble, sequence para jumble question should have helped it. Then this one was slightly time consuming. It was a time consuming sequence para jumble, right? However, if you invested time in it, perhaps if you've seen it later, you would realize that you were able to form the sequence. ठीक है, जिसने भी आंसर की रिस्पॉन्स शीट देखी है, सबको जस्टिफाइड लगेगा जो भी सीक्वेंस है. Para summary again an easy question. Okay, there was only one that covered everything, only one option covering everything, and the others had something or the other that was incorrect. So a boon for students who were in this slot in terms of parasummary. An easy or sentence out parajumble, again pretty doable. This one, yes, did require a bit of thinking, but there was a pattern here as well in this odd sentence out question. Okay, we were particularly discussing the outer space. Okay, this everybody understood, and basically a commercial future of this outer space, a commercial future. So if you see, we are talking about firms protecting them from competing claims, commercial activity, mining in space. Whereas 4 is a very general statement. It somehow brings in Russia into the picture, which has not been there in the other passages, right? Sorry, other sentences. So Russia in particular has condemned this, citing the US's disrespect for international law. अब international law कहाँ से आ गया बीच में? So ये बहुत ही general sentence था. It didn't talk about space. Okay. It didn't talk about commercial exploitation or commercial uh, future of the space. So that's why this could be eliminated as the whole sentence out. All right. And then we have a sequence parajumble, pretty easy again. Your sequence parajumbles out of 3, 2 were easy. Okay. So yes, this is it from my side. Any queries that you have in any of the questions, you can ask me. I'm here, right? Uh, in the verbal logic section, if there are any queries, please feel free to ask. So this is what the analysis schedule looks like. We are currently here. So today at 2 p.m. Savitri ma'am will meet you for slot 2, and at 5 p.m. Pradeep sir will meet you for slot 3. Okay. So do attend these analysis in case you were in these slots, or in case you are targeting CAT 22, it will benefit you a lot. If you found value in the session, if the concepts, if the questions that I explained to you are clear to you, do press the like button, okay, and do share it with your friends who've taken CAT or are planning to take CAT. Do subscribe to our channel, yes, and follow us at least on Telegram. We keep on giving a lot of important updates there, right? So this is it from my side. I will see you next time. Okay, bye.